the Kenyan government has finally given a glimpse of the positions it will be taking to the annual International Climate Change Gathering due to be held in Egypt in early November. The 27th Conference of Parties, known by its acronym as COP-27, will take place in the resort city of Sharm El Sheikh. President William Ruto is scheduled to lead the high-powered Kenya delegation and address the plenary session on behalf of Africa. NTV Science editor Zainab Wandati now reports on Kenya's key concerns and priorities as it heads to the summit.
I fear for my climate. I fear for my environment. I fear for my people. And I fear for my life.
Apudo was a person has been born and bred by the lake shore for over 20 years. Then comes 2020, climate change, the backflow of the lake, flooding, losing our homes, our pets, and other family members.
Personally, I'm a victim of climate change. We experienced conflicts between the communities, and I changed schools when I was in primary, like 3 times within a term. I walk and stare at the last tree standing. What happened to the others? We have turned them into trunks and trams. My air is polluted. Black clouds of smoke escape from industrial chimneys daily. Carbon emissions do not forgive my atmosphere.
In just a few days, Africa will host the 27th session of the United Nations Convention on Climate Change, and Kenya is busy preparing for it. It will be the 5th time that this convention is held in Africa, and Kenya has taken the 175 agenda items before the COP and grouped them into 11 categories that are considered priority areas for Kenya.
We are talking about, balancing the scale. Who is contributing more to the greenhouse gas effects in the globe? What is their responsibility? I think they need to take some responsibility as against those of us, Kenya and the African region, who are contributing the least, but yet the loss and damage is of untold levels.
The current drought sweeping through the Horn of Africa has cost Kenya billions of shillings in losses, especially in the livestock subsector, with an estimated 2 million heads of livestock having starved to death. Kenya will be seeking compensation for such losses when the sleeves are rolled and the negotiations begin at COP-27.
The issue of loss and damage as a result of climate change is going to inform the African demands during the COP-27.
Kenya will also be focusing on ways of coping with the impacts of climate change, technically known as adaptation, since the country is already bearing some of the worst consequences of climate change. And then there's the gender agenda.
One of the discussions is that in the COP25, there's issues like how could we increase the number of women participating in these conferences? And COP26 now moved away from just looking at the number of women participating to looking at their contribution. You can go there as a woman, but just sit there and not contribute. So how are they contributing? And even they're looking at the length, when they talk, how long do they take to, put in their perspectives at the conference? But now in COP27, we're not just looking at the number and the participation. How do women participation influence decision making?
In Busia, I will tell you for now, there's no food. We have been relying on the supply of food from Uganda, where production has been good because most of the times rain is good in Uganda. Unfortunately, currently, we are having even a cross-border effect. So the truth is my community, those who do not have job, the women are finding it hard to feed their families.
The COP is a complex meeting bringing together many countries and interests, and nations have to band together to negotiate as a group. Kenya, for instance, negotiates under the African Group, headed by the Africa Group of Negotiators. Kenya is also part of the G77 and China Group. This means that whatever priorities Kenya has at the COP have to be aligned with the priorities of the groups that Kenya is part of.
We have to move hunters a pack, especially the developing countries, because the developed nations do it perfectly.
President William Ruto and Environment Cabinet Secretary Soipan Tuya will be leading the Kenya delegation. And although the exact number of people in the delegation is not known yet, the government has urged all Kenyans attending the COP to rally behind Kenya's position.
What I want Kenyans to know is that I will be working very hard to make sure that all these different players and stakeholders, we come together. Civil society have their role. You know, they have to agitate for whatever thematic areas they stand for. But we have to come together at some point. I would want to see a team that will rally around the Kenyan position. A Kenyan position which again we will push and negotiate, that will be a position that will be embraced by the African region.
President Ruto is among the heads of state and government that will be attending the high-level presidential session, where he's expected to make a statement on behalf of the Committee of African Heads of State and Government on Climate Change.
Kenya cannot walk alone. For the negotiations that will be happening at the COP-27, again, as a country that is holding the chairmanship of CAHOSC, I will, be taking a pivotal position in terms of the discussions, the negotiations at the African level, being the head of delegation for Kenya.
COP27 has been branded an adaptation COP, and finance, which is also a priority area for Kenya, is expected to come up as Africa continues to push for more money to enable the continent meet its needs. The global goal on climate finance has been set at $100 billion, but a recent report indicates that Africa's funding needs are in excess of $1 trillion. Kenya alone needs $63 billion.
After 2020, after we've lost everything that we had, because all we own is a home and a land, I felt depressed. Long time. For a moment, I felt like taking away my life. Suicidal thoughts started cropping in. I felt like going to Lake Victoria and letting that water swallow me in, just the same way Lake Victoria took everything that we had because of flooding.
People and nations are suffering now. They need meaningful decisions now. Failure to act on loss and damage will lead to more loss of trust and more climate damage. This is a moral imperative that cannot be ignored, and COP27 must be the place for action on loss and damage.
I fear for my climate, I fear for my environment, I fear for my people, and I fear for my life.
Zainab Wandati, NTV.
Well,